What's something people don't know about history's greatest thinkers? Their thoughts on religion might surprise you. For centuries, religion has been the most effective tool of control, shaping societies through fear, blind obedience, and suppression of reason. It thrives on faith, belief without evidence, and demands unquestioning submission while offering no proof of its promises. The minds of the curious are shackled, the voices of the dissenters are silenced, and the masses are pacified with illusions. Yet history shows that where reason and skepticism rise, the grip of dogma weakens. The following quotes expose the contradictions, absurdities, and dangers of religious belief, spoken by some of the sharpest minds in history. Religion is regarded by the common people as true, by the wise as false, and by rulers as useful. Seneca. Is God willing to prevent evil but not able? Then he is not omnipotent. Is he able but not willing? Then he is malevolent. Epicurus' faith means not wanting to know what is true. Friedrich Nietzsche. Religion is excellent stuff for keeping common people quiet. Napoleon Bonaparte. A casual stroll through the lunatic asylum shows that faith does not prove anything. Friedrich Nietzsche. Men never commit evil so fully and joyfully as when they do it for religious convictions. Blaise Pascal. The way to see by faith is to shut the eye of reason. Benjamin Franklin. Religion is the sigh of the oppressed creature, the heart of a heartless world, and the soul of soulless conditions. It is the opium of the people. Karl Marx. To terrify children with the image of hell, to consider women an inferior creation, is that good for the world? Christopher Hitchens. We must question the story logic of having an all-knowing, all-powerful God who creates faulty humans and then blames them for his own mistakes. Gene Roddenberry. If God created us in his own image, we have more than reciprocated. Voltaire. The Bible book, a book that tells you to stone your children for disobedience but calls itself the good book. Robert G. Ingersoll. The world holds two classes of men, intelligent men without religion and religious men without intelligence. Abu Allah al-Ma'ari. All national institutions of churches, whether Jewish, Christian or Turkish, appear to me no other than human inventions set up to terrify and enslave mankind and monopolize power and profit. Thomas Paine. The fact that a believer is happier than a skeptic is no more to the point than the fact that a drunken man is happier than a sober one. George Bernard Shaw. If there is a God, atheism must seem to him as less of an insult than religion. Edmond de Goncourt. Christianity neither is nor ever was a part of the common law. Thomas Jefferson. Lighthouses are more helpful than churches. Benjamin Franklin. History, I believe, furnishes no example of a priest-ridden people maintaining a free civil government. Thomas Jefferson. What can be asserted without evidence can also be dismissed without evidence. Christopher Hitchens. You can safely assume you've created God in your own image when it turns out that God hates all the same people you do. Anne Lamott. Religion is the masterpiece of the art of animal training, for it trains people as to how they shall think. Arthur Schopenhauer. If there were no God, it would be necessary to invent him. Voltaire. The church says the earth is flat, but I know that it is round, for I've seen the shadow on the moon, and I have more faith in a shadow than in the church. Ferdinand Magellan. All thinking men are atheists. Ernest Hemingway. Heaven is for the gullible. Hell is for the cruel. Reality is for those who can think. Mark Twain. I cannot believe in the immortality of the soul. No, all this talk of an existence beyond the grave is the invention of priestcraft. Thomas Edison. The first requisite for the happiness of the people is the abolition of religion. Karl Marx. We have just enough religion to make us hate, but not enough to make us love one another. Jonathan Swift. No man ever believes that the Bible book means what it says. He is always convinced that it says what he means. George Bernard Shaw. The difference between a cult and a religion is the amount of real estate they own. Frank Zappa. I count religion but a childish toy, and hold there is no sin but ignorance. Christopher Marlowe. I don't know if God exists, but it would be better for his reputation if he didn't. Jules Renard. The Christian resolution to find the world ugly and bad has made the world ugly and bad. Friedrich Nietzsche. An all-powerful, all-knowing God, and yet he needs money. George Carlin. When one person suffers from a delusion, it's called insanity. When many people suffer from a delusion, it's called religion. Robert M. Pirsig. What's wrong with religion? It breeds civility, dependence, and cowardice. Emma Goldman. Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. Voltaire. The invisible and the non-existent look very much alike. Delos McCown priests are the only ones who can convince you that an invisible being needs your money. Gene Roddenberry. If history shows us anything, it's that you can get away with the most horrific crimes as long as you claim God told you to do it. There was a time when religion ruled the world. It is known as the Dark Ages. Ruth Herman Screen. God is a sound people make when they're too tired to think anymore. Edward Abbey. Why should I allow that same God to tell me how to raise my kids, who had to drown his own? Robert G. Ingersoll. Belief in the supernatural reflects a failure of the imagination. Edward Abbey. Creationists make it sound like a theory is something you dreamed up after being drunk all night. Isaac Asimov. People who don't like their beliefs being laughed at shouldn't have such funny beliefs. Ricky Gervais. Every sect, as far as reason will help them, makes use of it gladly, and where it fails them, they cry out. It is a matter of faith and above reason. John Locke. I am against religion because it teaches us to be satisfied with not understanding the world. Richard Dawkins. God is a comedian playing to an audience too afraid to laugh. Voltaire. Blind belief in authority is the greatest enemy of truth. Albert Einstein. All gods were immortal once until reason buried them. Percy Bysshe. Shelley. Philosophy is questions that may never be answered. Religion is answers that may never be questioned. The Bible book, the only bestseller that people swear by but rarely read. Faith is believing what you know ain't so. Mark Twain. If ignorance of the law is no excuse, then neither is ignorance of reality. Theology is the ignorance of natural causes reduced to a system. Baron de Holbach. If you could reason with religious people, there would be no religious people. Gregory House. Hugh Laurie. Theology. A mind stuck in the past, trying to control the future. The greatest tragedy in mankind's entire history may be the hijacking of morality by religion. Arthur C. Clarke. People die for religion, but religion has never died for people. One man's heresy is another man's common sense. Hell was created to scare people into behaving, and heaven was invented to make them feel rewarded for being scared. God, the most convenient excuse for human cruelty. If the Bible book were written today, it would be banned as hate speech. Prayer, the art of talking to oneself and calling it divine. Why worship a God who needs your constant validation? Miracles are just events we don't yet understand. Religion stops at awe. Science pushes forward. Religious faith, the only place where having no evidence is considered a virtue. The hands that help are holier than the lips that pray. Robert G. Ingersoll. You will never reach your destination if you stop and throw stones at every dog that barks. Religion has been barking for centuries. Winston Churchill paraphrased, "A miracle is just a coincidence with a religious person watching." The greatest enemy of knowledge is not ignorance, it is the illusion of knowledge, often provided by religion. Stephen Hawking, adapted. Sacred texts are only sacred because they're old. If written today, they'd be dismissed as lunacy. Humanity's progress is measured by how many gods it leaves behind. To claim certainty without evidence is the mark of faith. To seek truth despite uncertainty is the mark of reason. If an all-powerful God existed, he wouldn't need middlemen. Every war is a holy war to those who start it. If your God only speaks through ancient books and not through reason, maybe he's not talking at all. Religious conviction is the only kind of ignorance celebrated as virtue. If hell is full of thinkers and heaven is full of blind believers, then I know where I'd rather be. If the religious ever proved their claims, science would take them seriously. Skepticism is a virtue in any field but religion. Carl Sagan, adapted. The less evidence you have, the more faith you need, so religion is just a belief in things least likely to be true. A priest's job is to tell you you're sick so he can sell you a cure. Religious leaders need faith because they can't afford scrutiny. When you realize religion only exists where it is taught, you understand it is a product of conditioning, not truth. If religion made people good, prisons wouldn't be full of believers. A church without tithes is a business without revenue. Gods shrink as knowledge grows. Every god starts as a myth and ends as a relic. If faith healed, hospitals would be empty and churches would be full of wheelchairs. Prayer is talking to yourself and expecting an answer. God was made in the image of man, not the other way around. Ludwig Feuerbach, religion is what keeps the poor from murdering the rich. Napoleon Bonaparte, the first lie priests tell is that they speak for God. The second is that you must listen. Theology is just mythology with an army. Faith is not a virtue, it is an excuse for not thinking. To call religion a comfort is to say a man prefers his chains because they are lined with velvet. The number of gods you don't believe in is almost equal to mine. I just go one God further. Stephen F. Roberts. Religion survives by convincing people they are broken, then selling them an invisible cure. To learn who rules over you, simply find out who you are not allowed to criticize. Voltaire attributed, "A holy book is simply a collection of old mistakes, mistaken for wisdom. The gods we abandoned are called myths. The gods we keep are called faith." On prayer and worship, people who pray for food still need to cook it. If a child dies despite thousands praying, what does that say about prayer? If your God needs constant praise, he's more insecure than a teenage pop star. Your prayers don't work on amputees, do they? If God required prayer to act, then he wasn't all-knowing to begin with. On morality and religion, I don't need the threat of hell to be a decent person. If religion made people moral, why do we have prisons full of believers? Unknown. Any God that requires obedience over kindness is a tyrant. The devil needs permission, but God kills freely. A religious man will do what he is told is right. A moral man will do what he knows is right. On science versus religion. Science doesn't require faith, just proof. Every mystery religion once solved became science. God didn't create man, man created God, then science erased him. When science advances, gods retreat. Thunder was once the voice of a god, now it's just weather. On religious hypocrisy and power. Why do religious leaders always want money, but their God doesn't? If religion worked, hospitals would be empty and churches wouldn't need donations. Holy men get rich selling stories of heaven to the poor. The people who tell you God loves you are the same ones who tell you he'll torture you forever. Why does an all-powerful God need lawyers, armies, and tax exemptions? Religion is a snare and a racket. Joseph Franklin Rutherford. Religion is the everlasting dialogue between man and his conscience. John Cowper Powys. A God that is threatened by inquiry is no God at all. What can be more absurd than to suppose that a man has a right to kill me because he has a different opinion about religion than I have? Voltaire. All theists are atheists concerning other gods. I just take it one God further. Richard Dawkins. Nothing can be more contrary to religion and the clergy than reason and common sense. Voltaire. God is a comedian playing to an audience too afraid to laugh. Voltaire. God is the silence of the universe, and man is the cry that gives meaning to that silence. Jose Saramago, on faith, reason, and belief. Faith is believing what you know ain't so. Mark Twain. Religion is the fashionable substitute for belief. Oscar Wilde. If faith is believing without evidence, then religion is marketing the lie. Unknown. The essence of faith is being satisfied with not understanding. Soren Kierkegaard. Faith is the surrender of the mind, it's the glorification of voluntary ignorance. Christopher Hitchens. The world's most dangerous idea is that a God exists who tells people what to do. Peter Watson. What can be asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. Christopher Hitchens. The God of the theologians is simply an excuse not to think at all. A Pierre-Simon Laplace on religious control and fear. The only way to heaven is through the church's collection plate. Religion is the invention of men who wanted to enslave others without using chains. Robert G. Ingersoll. He who begins by loving Christianity better than truth will proceed by loving his own sect better than Christianity, and end in loving himself better than all. Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Religious institutions are like giant corporations selling an invisible product with a lifetime subscription. Religion is regarded as madness by those who are not indoctrinated and as truth by those who are. Fear created the first gods. Priests and rulers have always been in a secret league against the people. Priests deceive them and rulers oppress them. Holback. The priest tells the people they must be free, but only through the chains of faith. On heaven, hell, and the afterlife. Hell was created by men who could not rule on earth. Religion is the art of convincing people that their suffering will be rewarded after death. Heaven is for those who obey. Hell is for those who question. The man who invented hell was the cruelest of all men. If hell is full of thinkers, I'd rather burn than kneel. Eternal torture for finite sins, only an infinite tyrant would devise such a thing. Rare and historical perspectives. Religion is the masterpiece of the art of animal training, for it trains people as to how they shall think. Arthur Schopenhauer. Religious laws are like cobwebs which may catch small flies, but let wasps and hornets break through. Jonathan Swift. The church persecuted Galileo because he proved them wrong. What does that tell you about their love for truth? The first great lie was that man was created perfect but fell from grace. The second was that he could never rise again without the priests. Christianity came not to save humanity but to enslave it. Men invent gods when they lose faith in themselves. Priests are the magicians of the soul, turning guilt into profit. A man with a holy book and a sword always has an empire in mind. A religion that promises you heaven if you kneel and hell if you stand was never meant to free you. 100 gods once ruled the world, now one remains. Soon none will. The boldest statements. If a god needs to be defended by lies, then he is no god. If a god is all-powerful, he needs no servants. If he is just, he needs no bribes. If he is wise, he needs no prayers. They told me to believe. I asked for proof. They told me to obey. I asked why. They told me to kneel. I walked away. Men will only be free when the last priest is strangled with the entrails of the last king. Denis Diderot. When a man tells me his God speaks to him, I check if he is insane. When a crowd tells me, I check if they are armed. Religion is the last sanctuary of tyrants and the first refuge of fools. The difference between a god and a dictator is that only one demands your worship for eternity. You were born free. Religion exists to make you forget that. If you fear an invisible being more than injustice, you are already enslaved. The only thing a god has ever created is division. Religion is regarded by the common people as true, by the wise as false, and by rulers as useful. Seneca. If God really existed, it would be necessary to abolish him. Mikhail Bakunin. The way to see by faith is to shut the eye of reason. Benjamin Franklin. Is God willing to prevent evil, but not able? Then he is not omnipotent. Is he able but not willing? Then he is malevolent. Epicurus. If we believe absurdities, we shall commit atrocities. Voltaire. Give a man a fish, and he will eat for a day. Give him a religion, and he will starve while praying for a fish. People do not quit playing because they grow old. They grow old because they quit playing. Religion, on the other hand, makes people old before their time. George Bernard Shaw. A casual stroll through the lunatic asylum shows that faith does not prove anything. Friedrich Nietzsche. It is always better to have no ideas than false ones. To believe nothing than to believe what is wrong. Thomas Jefferson. The church is always trying to cure evil by keeping people ignorant of it. H.L. Mencken. Gods are fragile things. They may be killed by a whiff of science or a dose of common sense. Chapman Cohen. A single priest generally causes more evil than 100 hangmen. Voltaire. You can't convince a believer of anything, for their belief is not based on evidence, it's based on a deep-seated need to believe. Carl Sagan. Heaven and hell are nothing more than the carrot and the stick of the religious slave system. Robert G. Ingersoll. I'd rather have questions that can't be answered than answers that can't be questioned. Richard Feynman. Most people would rather die than think. In fact, they do so. Bertrand Russell. Science flies you to the moon. Religion flies you into buildings. Victor J. Stenger. If you want to get rich, start a religion. L. Ron Hubbard. All religions are founded on the fear of the many and the cleverness of the few. Stendhal. If you take nothing and put it in a hat, then take it out again, you haven't got something. But that's exactly how the universe was created, according to theologians. Lawrence M. Krauss faith means not wanting to know what is true. Friedrich Nietzsche. No God ever gave man anything, nor ever answered a prayer. Men have thanked the gods for what they got themselves. Robert G. Ingersoll. There is not enough love and goodness in the world to permit giving any of it away to imaginary beings. Friedrich Nietzsche. Every priest is a moralist for whom the world is too good, and a theologian for whom it is not bad enough. Friedrich Nietzsche. A man is accepted into a church for what he believes and turned out for what he knows. Mark Twain. Organized religion is a sham and a crutch for weak-minded people who need strength in numbers. Jesse Ventura. All national institutions of churches, whether Jewish, Christian or Turkish, appear to me no other than human inventions set up to terrify and enslave mankind and monopolize power and profit. Thomas Paine. Nothing in life is to be feared, it is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more so that we may fear less. Marie Curie. To surrender to ignorance and call it God has always been premature, and it remains premature today. Isaac Asimov. Philosophy is questions that may never be answered. Religion is answers that may never be questioned. Religious bondage shackles and debilitates the mind and unfits it for every noble enterprise. James Madison. Religion is the opium of the masses, but it's also the cyanide of critical thought. The Bible book and the church have been the greatest stumbling blocks in the way of women's emancipation. Elizabeth Cady Stanton. All gods are homemade, and it is we who pull their strings, and so give them the power to pull ours. Aldous Huxley. The world is my country, all mankind are my brethren, and to do good is my religion. Thomas Paine. The hands that help are better far than lips that pray. Robert G. Ingersoll. In no instance have the churches been guardians of the liberties of the people. James Madison. If there is a soul, it is not something given by a god. It is something we create through thought, compassion, and reason. The Bible book is a book that has been read more and examined less than any book that ever existed. Thomas Paine. A cult is a religion with no political power. Tom Wolfe. Science adjusts its views based on what's observed. Religion is the denial of observation so that belief can be preserved. Tim Minchin. The notion that faith in an invisible deity makes one moral is as absurd as believing that a puppet is real because the strings are hidden. Unknown. When men stop believing in gods, they don't believe in nothing, they believe in anything. G.K. Chesterton. If all the gods have been created by man, why does man still bow before his own creation? Unknown. Man will never be free until the last god is buried in the last priest's grave. Faith is believing in something you know isn't true. Mark Twain. The more I study religions, the more I am convinced that man never worshipped anything but himself. Richard Francis Burton. Religion easily has the best bullshit story of all time. George Carlin. People say we need religion, but I think we need common sense. Lawrence Krauss. There is nothing so absurd that it cannot be believed as truth if repeated often enough. William James. The gods offer no rewards for intellect. There was never one yet that showed any interest in it. Robert G. Ingersoll. What we call faith is often just the excuse for refusing to think. Sam Harris. When you understand why you dismiss all other gods, you will understand why I dismiss yours. Stephen F. Roberts. There are no devils, no gods, just the fear of ignorance. Hypatia of Alexandria. The first step toward philosophy is incredulity. Denis Diderot. It's easier to fool people than to convince them that they have been fooled. Mark Twain. The church has always been willing to trade miracles for money. Robert G. Ingersoll. To argue with a person who has renounced the use of reason is like administering medicine to the dead. Thomas Paine. If prayer worked, hospitals would be empty and churches would be full. All great truths begin as blasphemies. George Bernard Shaw. The less people know, the more stubbornly they know it. Osho. We must learn to question everything, especially what we are told to believe. Bertrand Russell. Believing is easier than thinking. That is why there are more believers than thinkers. Bruce Calvert. Faith is the excuse people give for believing something when they don't have a good reason. Matt Dillahunty. In the end, truth does not fear scrutiny, but dogma demands obedience. The more we question, the freer we become. Let reason, not blind faith, be our guide. Unmasking the illusion, the truth about religion. Holy lies, exposing religious contradictions. The faith deception, why belief is control. God versus reason, the ultimate battle, breaking the chains of faith. God's morality versus human morality, who is really just? If the biblical God created evil, is he the devil? Religion's obsession with fear, hell, damnation, and control. Is heaven just a scam for the fearful? Eternal torture for finite sins. Only an infinite tyrant would devise such a thing. If hell is full of thinkers, I'd rather burn than kneel. The man who invented hell was the cruelest of all men. Why priests and politicians are best friends, the church's business model, guilt, fear, and profit. How religion was designed to make you obedient. Are we still slaves to ancient superstitions? Religion is the invention of men who wanted to enslave others without using chains. A religion that promises you heaven if you kneel and hell if you stand was never meant to free you. Priests and rulers have always been in a secret league against the people. If God needs worship, is he just an insecure dictator? Why does an all-powerful God need money? Does faith make you blind to truth? Why belief without evidence is just intellectual suicide? Faith is the surrender of the mind. It's the glorification of voluntary ignorance. The God of the theologians is simply an excuse not to think at all. If faith is believing without evidence, then religion is marketing the lie. Did Christianity copy pagan myths? The Bible's most insane contradictions, the truth about the Council of Nicaea, how the Bible book was edited to serve power. No man ever believes that the Bible means what it says. He is always convinced that it says what he means. History proves that gods die when their believers gain knowledge. The church persecuted Galileo because he proved them wrong. What does that tell you about their love for truth? How religion became the world's most profitable business. Tithes, offerings, and religious billionaires, where does your money go? If churches pay no taxes, why are they so rich? From God's mouth to the pastor's pocket. How faith funds luxury. The only way to heaven is through the church's collection plate. An all-powerful, all-knowing God, and yet he needs money. Priests are the only ones who can convince you that an invisible being needs your money. Religion, the root of war and hate throughout history. How religious beliefs justify atrocities and holy wars, the bloodshed behind sacred texts, the religious hypocrisy of thou shalt not kill. Those who can make you believe absurdities can make you commit atrocities. If history shows us anything, it's that you can get away with the most horrific crimes as long as you claim God told you to do it. They lied to you about religion. Proof that God is a human invention. The church won't tell you who invent heaven and hell. Do you really think an all-powerful God needs money? If faith is so powerful, why do believers still suffer? When you pray for money but end up funding the pastor's next vacation? Would a just God create hell just for questioning him? God, all-powerful, all-knowing, but somehow needs you to fight for him online. Let us know in the comments below. Until next time, keep questioning and stay curious.